Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en el mundo. Mi invitado especial, gente, sí, mi invitado especial es nada más y nada menos que Bill Apter, la leyenda viviente de la industria de la lucha libre, senior editor actualmente de Sportskeeda, de la marca número 1 angloparlante de Pro Wrestling Journalism en general en el mundo. Ellos tienen de todo un poco. Leyenda que estuvo con PWI muchos tiempos, imitador por excelencia, autor de su propio libro Is Wrestling Fixed? I Didn't Know It Was Broken, entre muchísimas otras cosas que ha hecho en su carrera. Bill, it is an absolute honor to have you back here at Lucha Libre Online. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, and I love your speech, and thank you for introducing me. And when I was growing up in New York, I used to watch Lucha Libre from the Olympic Auditorium on UHF TV, and they would go, Canal 4 Canal 41, the grande spectacular Lucha Libre. I used to love that. And then, of course, your namesake, Pedro Morales, was one of my closest friends. We share the same birthday every year when he was alive, October 22nd. And Pedro Morales was always, the broadcaster would always ask him, Pedro, are you, Vince McMahon would say, Pedro, are you up for your match against Stan Hansen? And Pedro would say, Vince, I am ready for any kind of action, baby. So, and I've been to Puerto Rico so many times, and I love that island nation so much. I really do.
Thank you very much for all the love for Puerto Rico, for Pedro Morales, and for the Latin culture in general. And that's actually my first question about this interview. You still are a pro wrestling journalist, the original one, the first one that made this an actual business, an actual profession. And you saw someone bloom in his wrestling career, and I'm talking about the guy from Culebra, Puerto Rico, Pedro Morales. You saw his highs, his downs, his ups, his everything. But I want to talk about a specific moment, and that's the moment where Pedro Morales, and I believe you were there in person, conquered the WWF heavyweight champion at that moment. Were you present that night, correct?
Absolutely. I covered all the matches at the Garden. It was one of the most chilling, goosebump raising type of matches I've ever seen. It was a classic because we didn't realize that Pedro was going to win, but I think the spurning on of all the 21,000 fans, and at least half to three quarters were the Latinos that came to see him from New York. They refused to let him lose with their yelling and screaming, Pedro, Pedro, Pedro. And the moment that he and Koloff fell back together and Pedro lifted his shoulder at the 3 count, the place went crazy. Ex-champion Bruno Sammartino came in, put the belt around his waist. And if you go to YouTube, somewhere there is a interview with Bill Apter interviews Pedro Morales after he won the title. That was an exclusive interview I did back then. It was marvelous. Pedro was a wonderful friend. On one of the occasions, he led the Puerto Rican Day parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, and he let me sit in the float with him. We were that close. Yeah. And he always used to say, he used to call me Billy. Yeah. And he was just sensational. I miss him very, very, very much.
I didn't have the privilege, unfortunately, to meet him because when I entered the industry itself, like Pedro was a little bit away from the whole industry. But how was working with him? How was he as a human? You were his friend. You saw both sides.
He was a gentleman, absolute gentleman. He loved the fans. There wasn't one fan that I ever saw come over to him to ask for an autograph that he would say no to. He would stand there for hours signing autographs. He loved the people. Yeah, and actually, we lived about 10 miles away from each other in Queens, New York. He lived in Elmhurst. And he was making a ton of money back then, and he still lived in an area that was very different ethnicities there. And he didn't have a big house. He and his wife, Karen, had an apartment. there, and he was just like everybody else. And periodically, people told me they used to see him just take the subway to the Garden, and all the
Wow.
fans would be with him. Yeah, yeah, he was ready for any kind of action, baby.
You mentioned a key name in this conversation, and that's the longest reigning WWF World Champion. That's Bruno Sammartino. Till this day, that is still the record.
Yeah.
You witness the night that record ended. Like the history itself, many years, many decades after it happened, it's still been mentioned on WWE
Oh yeah,
programming.
it was the first time I had ever been to a match where someone lost a match and 21,000 people in an arena were like dead silent. It was like a funeral. Yeah, and it was a very heartbreaking night. But Bruno was relieved when he lost the title because he had not been with his family for years. He was on the road all the time, went home a couple of days a week if he could. His body was aching. You could see the cauliflower ear. He needed time to rest up and figure out whether he really wanted to come back or not. But just like Pedro, Bruno was an absolute gentleman and just a great guy. He and I would have hours-long discussions on the telephone about the wrestling business, about the competitors, because back then, because of the internet, fans know everything right now. But back then, it was a situation where pro wrestling was like any other sport. People would say, oh, that's all fixed. And I didn't know it was broken, my book. But anyway, people would think that, but they never knew for real what the story was. But every person that stepped into that ring against Bruno, or even on their own levels, whatever those were, they were all amazing athletes, all well-conditioned, amazing athletes. And the guys who weren't well-conditioned had a personality that brought them fame in the ring. So it's very interesting. So I want to ask you something. You introduced me as senior editor of Sportskeeda, and you know at sportskeedawrestling.com for the past few weeks, we have been urging fans to be wrestling patriotic and go out and vote on your computer. All right. And if you go to sportskeedawrestling.com, right up on the first page, a box will come up where you can still vote. Now, here's my question to you, because I'm going to turn this around, because nobody probably ever did this with you. Are you ready, Mr. Morales?
I'm always ready, Mr. Apter.
Did you vote?
I did.
Well, I happen to have on the Apter chat phone here, I happen to have the awards categories, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot and see who today you might have put your votes in, but like me, sometimes these things change from day to day.
Yes.
Okay, there's one day I'll say so-and-so is the greatest wrestler of all time. The next day I'll say somebody else, because that keeps me out of trouble with what I do. I always remember Harley Race saying to me, you know, I hear you always talking about Bruno, but you know I'm better, right? So anyway, I'm going to hit you up with the categories, and let's see today.
This is going to be really tough.
What's that?
This is going to be really tough to do it again.
February 24th, 2022, New York/Philadelphia Eastern Time. Let me first take my medicine, my Fruit Adventure Tic Tacs.
And to all our fans out there, it's Sportskeeda Wrestling Awards. They're available to vote now. The link is going to be below this conversation. Either you're seeing it on YouTube, either you're seeing it on Instagram or on Facebook. It's going to be down here. And the only thing you need to do is click over there and responsibly. Booker T voted.
Wait.
TDP
you said it's going to be down there? What are you, the old NWO?
The link.
Where are you talking? Yo, down there. Okay, so also, when you vote, you could be eligible for some prizes, and you'll also be comparing your votes to those of legends like
Bill Apter.
No?
DDP.
Rob
Van Dam.
Yes, Rob Van Dam. Booker T, DDP, Renee Paquette. You know, she's used to be Renee Young, the the lady of Mox, Vince Russo, who we had on before, and so many other.
The man with the head.
Yeah.
Al Snow.
Yes, Al Snow too. Mickey James.
Everyone voted. Hugo
Everybody voted. So I'm going to now put you on the public stage just for today. Are you settled and ready?
I'm a little bit worried, but yes, I'm ready.
All right, let's start with the wrestler of the year as of today. The candidates are Roman Reigns, Big E, Bryan Danielson,
the American Dragon,
CM Punk, or Kenny Omega. Who would you pick today and why?
There's no one better than Roman Reigns in 2021. The way he told the story, the way he returned the wrestling psychology back to SmackDown, the way he performed. Everyone in his stable is important, and everything he does happens for a reason. He is the guy why people, are constantly seeing WWE. He's the longest reigning Universal Champion. So to me, in 2021, that's the year of the Tribal Chief.
Okay, so because you said that, you can now get up and move to the head of the table.
So I can ask you who you voted for.
No, you'll have to. This is my interview here. You can't turn this down. I know it's your show, but you agreed. I voted for each one of them. It's a draw. 60 minutes. All right, female wrestler of the year. This is really, and again, this is 2021. But as of today, Becky Lynch, who is the man, Sasha Banks, who is the woman, Bianca Belair with that great, I always say Bianca Belair with that great head of hair, Hikaru Shida, or Dr. Britt Baker, DMD.
Britt Baker has had a phenomenal year. The way she performs, the way she looks, and she, in my opinion, at least today, Britt Baker is the centerpiece of all of it wrestling. So I'm going with the doctor.
Okay, so now you get to the head of the table and you get free dental services.
This is good. Good for business.
All right, rookie of the year.
Ooh.
Hook. All right, Jade Cargill. Braun Breaker, the son of Rick Steiner. Tony D'Angelo or Cora Jade.
I'm picking the NXT champion, the guy that inside his first year conquered gold in the multicolor brand and is now the face of NXT 2.0. I'm taking the son of Steiner, the nephew of another Steiner. I'm staying with Braun Breaker.
Okay, so now you got the head of the table, you got free dental service, and Rick Steiner's a real estate agent. You get a free house. This is good. All right, match of the year. Ooh. We got some candidates here. And I picked one where I'm going to get yelled at for. I'm not going to tell you what it is. But okay, we're going to start off with Adam Page, Hangman Adam Page, the AEW champion, world champion, against Bryan Danielson. Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson. Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair. That was the Survivor Series match. The Young Bucks versus the Lucha Brothers. Edge versus Seth Rollins in Saudi Arabia, or Walter versus Dragunov.
That's my pick.
You know what? I'm going to admit to you, I said that was a chop fest. It was one of the most vicious matches I have ever seen.
That was my pick because at one point last year, due to being drained from the legal work and everything, I was like losing a little bit of passion for the wrestling industry. I'm not going to lie. But once I saw Dragunov and Walter not only chopping the living heck out of each other, but telling a story in the middle of it, man, the Tsar won. The ring general was finally defeated. I'm picking Walter versus Ilya Dragunov as the match of the year.
You will now be able to come to Apter's Alley with me and sit there and take all the comments we're going to get for what? What did you choose? Okay. All right, let's go to.
So that was your pick.
Yeah, that was my pick. That's what I'm saying. Both of us.
It's a good match.
Comeback of the year, of course, CM Punk with that like 20-minute audience comeback. Becky Lynch, the man's in there. Barack Lesnar, Christian Cage, or W. Morrissey.
100%, it's gotta be the guy that was outside of the wrestling industry for 7 years, and that pop in Chicago blew my ears better than that. Chicago is multiple things, sports, pizza, but Chicago is CM Punk, so CM Punk is gotta be the answer.
Okay,
It's my
Chicago,
answer.
by the way, is also the hometown of the head man of Wrestling Inc. and my good friend Nick House.
Nick Husband.
Yes, yes. All right, the worst storyline of 2021. Austin Theory and Vince McMahon. Sit down over here, you. All right. The Miz getting eaten up by the zombies.
Gotta be the worst.
Well, see, they didn't know about Tic Tac Fruit Adventures at that point. Could have eaten those. Randy Orton spitting black goo. Madcap Morris and Baron Corbin. Lacey Evans and Ric Flair. What do you got?
I recall this was really, really, really tough, but you got eaten by zombies, and 2 weeks after you were okay. So, man,
Well,
I'm going with the zombies.
They went to the zombie remediation center. That's what it was. Okay, best storyline. Let's go for the best storyline. Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega. Becky Lynch against Liv Morgan. Roman Reigns versus Barack Lesnar. I can't say his name normally anymore.
Me neither.
Thunder Rosa versus Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, or Edge versus Seth Rollins. Best storyline.
We are only taking into consideration that this was for 2021. I love Lesnar and Reigns, but the best part of that rivalry is still on its way. Man, I loved the trilogy of Rollins and Edge. Every single thing they've done was art. So
yes,
that was
agree.
Pure art.
I just wish Seth would drop one thing from his repertoire. Drives me crazy.
But it works because it gets everyone mad.
No, I know. I enjoy his work very much. All right, Brett, best promo skills. CM Punk, Paul Heyman, MJF, Michael Jacob Friedman, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, or Edge.
Phenomenal list. But in my opinion, the best in their game today, and the closest thing we've ever experienced to Bobby the Brain Heenan, it's gotta be Paul Heyman. I'm staying with Paul Heyman.
That's great. That's great. That's a great choice. That's a great choice. The best, we call the best good guy of the year. We back in the magazine days, we called them fan favorites and rule breakers. So the best fan favorite of the year, Big E, he had an incredible year. Xavier Woods, the King, Hangman Adam Page, Liv Morgan, or Darby Allin. This is the best good guy of the year.
Hangman Page. The fans and their love brought him into the main event scene. Since the moment he got to AEW, he was always cheered. He was always beloved. He had a beer with his fans. He take pictures with his fans. He's always there, for the fan base. So I'm staying with AEW's champion, Hangman Adam Page.
Do you like the WWE larger version of him, the adult version, Brock Lesnar?
I love the Viking cowboy version of Brock Lesnar.
That's the album. That's the older version, the not senior version, but the grown-up version.
The mature evil version.
Yes. Finally, despicable bad guy, rule breaker of the year. Here is the list. The head of the table, Roman Reigns. Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. I know I'm sloppy writing. MJF, Becky Lynch, or Charlotte Flair.
There's not a single bad guy or heel in the industry today that can approach what MJF is doing. So my pick is the guy that drives me nuts. Like I see that dude in the television and I just feel the need to punch it. Like he's that type of annoying guy, old school era style, that with a simple microphone will drive you nuts and make you, go jumping the fence through the ring. So MJF.
He's a must hear, don't turn the channel type of person.
That's the best description. I'm staying with MJF.
All right, so that's the categories I have right now. All right, so as of February 24th, Eastern Standard Time, those are your picks. And again, you might change them tomorrow. You might change them later tonight. So now I'm morphing the show back to you. Thank you for doing that. Really
Thank you. And to all our fans, make sure you go to Sportskeeda Wrestling Awards at sportskeedawrestling.com and vote. Bill Apter already did. There's controversy in the results. There's controversy in the names. But the most important thing, and this is actually my next question about it, is that you and Sportskeeda reunited a bunch of brilliant minds inside the wrestling industry. And all of them voted for this, and all of them give their opinion on this topic.
Even Eric Bischoff, even Eric Bischoff did it. And
I know.
Arn Anderson.
There are so many people that voted for it. Even Shark Boy did. So
yes.
How did you, Reju, and Sportskeeda, the whole team manage to find this, all-star creative wrestling team and put them in the same place in order to make the Sportskeeda Wrestling Awards possible for the first time?
Well, as you know, I've been in the pro wrestling sports entertainment business for 50 years now. 50 years, and I'm still around. So I called a lot of people. Raju had already established a relationship with quite a few of the people. Vince Russo also had a relationship with a lot of, when I'm saying he had a relationship, meaning friendship above the wrestling industry.
Dutch mentality.
So we all put our minds together and our cell phones together, and we established an all-star expert panel. And now we're looking at all of you to become part of our expert panel by going to Sportskeeda and vote, because you only have another week or so until the results come out. And I know that there are wrestlers everywhere and wrestling talent and promoters looking at who is going to take the prizes for the very first Sportskeeda Pro Wrestling Awards.
There's something I need to ask. You've been in this industry for 50 years. You started charging just pennies for the first magazines you created. How do you still find the passion?
Wait, I need to stop you. I did not create the magazines. Okay. I worked for Stanley Weston. He was my mentor, right? He got me into the magazines. He had already owned the publishing company. So a lot of people think that I started the magazine. So I'm glad you brought that up. I was hired at $25 a day, 3 days a week, to work in his office in his house, where I filed photos. I did all the darkroom work, developed all the pictures, and he gave me a camera, and I started going to the shows. And was at the same time, I was doing a radio show in New York where I bought my own time, called Inside Wrestling, which was the name of the magazine at that time too. So I infiltrated the business, because back then everybody was very leery of anybody coming in, but I knew when not to talk and when to listen, which for me, not talking is very difficult. And little by little, wrestlers would see that they would get on my radio show, and then they'd have their pictures in the magazines. So it started being like, hey, this guy's okay. So that's how I never owned the magazines. And I'm just putting this out there because you're not the only one. There are millions of fans. Oh, I used to buy your magazines. I became the face of it, because when I went on out of town to places like Georgia and Florida and Jim Crockett promotions, I went there with a shirt and tie and a suit on, and they said, this guy can talk. He looks impressive as a businessman. Let's put him on our TV. And that's how people started getting to know me. And yeah, so that's the story. But your question was, you know, at the beginning, it just, the magazines, I think that the first magazine I bought, Wrestling Review, was 50 cents.
Wow. 50 cents.
Yeah, and now I'm working for Inside the Ropes magazine, which is a British publication. And you can get it in the United States, and maybe in you may be able to get it where you are in Puerto Rico, or you can go to InsideTheRopesMagazine.com, and it's a great glossy magazine. It really, really looks great. And my old alma mater, PWI, is still publishing a few times a year, and I hold nothing against them. I just don't work for them anymore. And Kevin McElhaney has taken over the ship from Stu Sachs, the editor of the magazine. I never wanted to be an editor. I always wanted to be out in the field and doing what I love, and mixing with the wrestling people, the promoters, and the fans. And I've got a lot of what I call Apter chatters out there that if anybody ever says anything nasty about me online, my Apter chatters jump on them. So
how do you still, after 50 years, find that passion to still love this industry, to still love wrestling? Because after 50 years doing the same thing, quote unquote, same thing, you know, the same profession, some people can get tired, but not Bill Apter. I see that fire in your eyes. I still see that passion for this industry. How do you do it?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question? I don't know. I never questioned it. It's just there. I love the excitement of every day something else happening. And even though it's not the same type of sport I grew up with, I've been able to change with the times. I went from magazine to internet. I was the first person to put video interviews on the internet when it was up on onewrestling.com, on any of the websites. And I went from internet to my own shows on YouTube, etc. And things are culminating with a great job at Sportskeeda. And I still maintain a full-time day job of helping people with disabilities to find jobs for a nonprofit company called Alltech in Pennsylvania here. So yeah, I wonderful Willie keeps going, baby.
I'm really happy to hear that. Before we go to our last question, I want to mention something that's just a little bit behind you at this moment, and that's Is Wrestling Fixed? I didn't know it was working. I'm going to say this in Spanish as well. Está disponible ahora mismo el libro de Bill Apter, Is Wrestling Fixed? I didn't know it was broken. La lucha libre arreglada. Yo no sabía que eso estaba, vamos a decirlo de esa manera, dañado. Está disponible en Amazon.com, está disponible en audiobook también. Yo lo tengo en audiobook y a mí me encantó. Es un libro que te narra toda la carrera desde los escenarios backstage con Abdullah the Butcher y el tenedor y toda la cosa. Te narra todos estos personajes como Ox Baker. Te habla de todo el mundo, todas las imitaciones como las que hizo anteriormente. La imitación de Harley Race, por darles un ejemplo. Habla de toda su trayectoria, pero sobre todo de cómo llegó e hizo todo para cuidar el kayfabe en su era, de su mismo padre, por ejemplo. Así que adquieran el libro a través de Amazon.com, está excelente, excelente, o a través de audiobook también está disponible. Which is actually my last question.
Well, you know, it's also available on Audible in the audio format. It's 9 hours. And I do a lot of my imitations. Yeah, and I do a lot of my imitations in there and things. And it's a lot of fun. So if you're going on a long trip and you want to be entertained with some, you know what Jim Cornette said about my book?
What?
Jim Cornette said, Bill Apter's book sucks because he doesn't bury anybody. It's just nice, fun stories.
It is really nice. And that's actually my last, and it's regarding the book, the last question. You tell a story where you had to protect, let's say this way, you didn't know who was going to win the match, but the editor or the person in charge of the magazine just gave you the camera and told you that you had to go to the garden that night, and you brought your father with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And your father didn't know what was actually happening. He was just happy to go and see wrestling. How hard was to protect kayfabe and storylines from your own family, from everyone?
My dad and I had a special relationship. He was a big sports fan. And we'd go to the garden together, and he always had a little Instamatic film camera. He'd sit next to me. The night that Bruno lost the title to Ivan Koloff, his little junky camera took a better picture than my $49 camera. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So I just told my dad what Mr. Weston, my publisher, would say to me. He would just say, make sure you have plenty of film for the finish. So that kind of told me. And then when I went backstage, Willie Gilsenberg, who was Vince McMahon's partner who ran a lot of the New Jersey towns, called me over and he says, did Stanley talk to you? And I said, sort of. And he just winked his eye. So I kind of knew at that point, but I didn't want to know. You know, a lot of people said to me when I was going out of town for shows, oh, Apter's here, so he knows the title is going to change hands. And I always told them, don't tell me. I said, I want to, it's all still real to me. But protecting kayfabe was people, Mr. Weston always gave me the answer. He always said, if somebody comes over to you, and that's what he sounded like, somebody comes over to you and says, is wrestling fake? You say, absolutely not. Just like that. And that's what I used to do. So, and the guys knew that after a while. They knew I was always protecting, because I could have given everything away and I wouldn't do that, because it was a very closed business back then, and not everybody got in, and they accepted me. And I decided that if I'm going to be one of the people in the business there, I'm going to go with the code of you never reveal what's going on.
That was challenging.
By the way, the end story with my dad, when he and my mom moved down to West Palm Beach, Florida, and they retired, Eddie Graham, I called Eddie Graham and I said, my dad's moving down. There's a show there in West Palm every Monday night. He said, have him wear a suit. He can sit at the timekeeper's table and help ring the bell every Monday night. So every Monday night he did that, and he'd always call me later at night. Hey, Ernie Ladd said hello. Hey, superstar Billy Graham said hello. It's incredible. And they all knew my dad. They all knew him. Yeah.
So he was famous at the end of his career as well.
Well, he was famous at the West Palm Beach Auditorium on Monday nights.
It was part of the boys now.
Yeah, yeah. They all took very good care of him. They really loved him.
Just really happy to hear that, Bill. It's been an absolute honor to have a living legend like you inside the wrestling industry, inside the journalism world, inside life in general. An absolute honor. Thanks to Riju Dasgupta, our friend, for making this possible. Make sure to vote at Sportskeeda Wrestling Awards right now. The link is below this. Click.
Do your duty. Vote.
You need to pick your favorites. Bill Apter did. Diamond Dallas Page did. Rob Van Dam did. You can do it as well.
Eric Bischoff did. Do you know how hard it would be for him to do something like this? But he was very objective and he did it.
And fortunately, he did. Booker T, like Mickey James. There are a list of incredible people inside this industry. Do your duty as a civilian, as a professional wrestling fan, and click.
Professional wrestling civilian. I like that.
Professional wrestling civilian.
We could start a whole new fan club.
Just click in the link, vote, and do your thing. And let's see who are the best of 2021. Bill, an absolute honor to have you here as our guest. Wishing you success in your career and in your personal life. And thank you very much for your time. Any last words you have for the fans of Latin America?
Yeah, I'll see you at the matches eventually after COVID. Thank you to all my fans in Latin America. And I always appreciated your wonderful support. Mucho gracias. I can roll the R's. All right.
And you did. Let's wrap this up en español. Este fue Bill Apter el editor chief, el jefe de Sportskeeda, el hombre de Pro Wrestling Illustrated, el hombre de Libre Wrestling Fix, I Didn't Know It Was Broken, y una de las mentes más brillantes en toda nuestra profesión. Y Michael Morales para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en el mundo.
Sí, señor.